I just killed it on this deal, dude. Deal of the day, deal of the week, deal of the month.
And what is that?
But
I'm asking $50,000.
50,000?
Chumlee is not the most reliable person on Pawn Stars, but every once in a while he does hit the jackpot. Be sure to watch the entire video to see some of the craziest jackpots Chumlee hit for the show. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. Let's get into the video.
A simple reminder on how to enter our brand new giveaway. We will be giving away either an iPhone X Max, the new iPad mini, or a MacBook Pro. It's really your choice. So be sure to leave a like, comment the keyword, subscribe, and turn on notifications to enter the giveaway. It's really that simple. Go for it.
The fake jersey.
Half years ago, she was nice enough to give it to me.
This is amazing, man. I mean, there's very few guys in the world that can compare to him in that sport.
In the sports memorabilia world, there are many things you have to look out for, and the biggest and most important things are fakes. Forged signatures, items claimed to be from an athlete yet they're not, that kind of thing.
Do you have any paperwork or anything with you? Or?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You'd think that Chumlee would be a sucker for these sports fakes, but when one bad item did come around to him, he knew it wasn't right. And that's a rarity that needs to be discussed for reasons you'll understand in a bit.
What'd you want to do with it?
I'd like to sell it. I think around 45,000 would be a fair offering.
Specifically, a person came to the gold and silver pawn shop and decided to sell Corey and Chumlee, who were at the counter, a Willie Mays jersey. Willie Mays is one of the most important baseball players in all of history. Not only did he set a standard for the skill of playing baseball,
What do we got? Check it out, it's a Willie Mays uniform. What, that's all? I thought you had something good for me.
he also set numerous records in Major League Baseball and was a trailblazer in just about every sense of the word. Thus, if it was his jersey, it most definitely would be worth a pretty penny.
I'm very confident it's real. I mean, the way my family cherished it, and the way my uncle was a sports collector. And
On the surface, it looked real enough. Yet there was some things that struck out to Chumlee as off. And you know something isn't legitimate when Chumlee is the one pointing out a major flaw in the seller's pitch. I mean, come on, it's Chumlee. He's not exactly the most knowledgeable person in the store, you know. Anyway, what Chumlee quite accurately noticed was that the jersey was clean. Squeaky clean, in fact. Yet the guy said that this was a game-worn jersey.
This doesn't look game worn. He was sliding around in the dirt and the grass. I imagine there would be a bunch of stains on it.
While Willie Mays was a legend in hitting, he also stole a ton of bases. And when you steal bases, you slide in the dirt. And yet there wasn't a single hint of a dirt stain on this piece. Plus, he was an outfielder, and they get dirty. Was it just washed afterwards, or was this something else? The second red flag was that the piece didn't have a certificate of authenticity.
Do you have any paperwork or anything with you? Or?
no, I don't.
And for something that is meant to be a true piece of baseball history, a certificate of authenticity is almost a requirement. And yet, Corey not only bought the piece, he paid $31,000 for it. That's a lot for just about any baseball piece. But Corey was confident in the purchase. Chumlee, not so much. As they would usually do, they tried to sell the item in the shop. The asking price was $80,000. No one bought it, and can you blame them for that price? Eventually, they got tired of it in the shop, so they put it up at auction and made $19,200, which is a $12,000 loss. But after the auction, a news story ran as the buyer eventually found out that the jersey was a full-on fake. It wasn't real at all, never worn by Mays or nothing. So not only did they lose $12,000, they could have lost nothing if they had just listened to Chumlee, which I would bet he brings up to Corey every so often. Now you might be thinking, but how is this a jackpot for the Pawn Stars if they lost money here? And yeah, you're right, it wasn't a big money win for Chumlee, but it was a big jackpot of a moral victory. Corey is supposed to be the heir apparent and prodigy because of Rick and the old man's influence over him in his life in the shop. Chumlee didn't have that, and yet he saw the fake. That's worth celebrating. Victorian era saw handle pistols.
Oh, 3,500 would be my bottom.
I can do 33, but I can't go a dime higher.
Given the age we live in right now, the idea of glamorizing the sale of firearms most definitely seems off, which is likely why the Pawn Stars don't show off a sale of a firearm unless it's an antique or really cool. Which was the case when a man came in with a pair of nickel-plated pistols that were from the Victorian era of history, which for the record meant that they were very old, and by that extension, a very old school way of making guns. For example, these guns were ones with percussion caps, which means that they were rather advanced pistols for the time, as it made them more reliable to fire than previous firearms of the period. Anyway, after being amazed by the reveal, the negotiations began. The owner wanted over $8,000 for them, which could be fair, but Chumlee wasn't buying it. Not because he didn't think they were valuable, even he wouldn't be that dumb to think they were not, but he could tell they were in pretty rough shape, including having rust, damages to certain parts, and more.
You can still see a little bit down here. And the barrels have rust and even pitting, and you got a dent right here.
The owner tried to play it off, but Chumlee knew his eyes weren't lying this time.
Well, it's a patina of age.
I wouldn't call rust patina. You bought an old car with rust on it, would you call it patina?
Wisely, Chumlee called in an expert for help in regards to evaluation and pricing. According to the expert, they were indeed rare and made by a very well-known gunmaker from the Victorian era. But, like Chumlee suspected, their value was less than $8,000.
This is like the most famous gunmaker during the Victorian era. Well, the condition of them really drags the value down.
So he got them for $3,300, which means he basically knocked $5,000 off the asking price.
I'll tell you what, I can do 33, but I can't go a dime higher.
I'll accept your deal on a handshake.
That's some pretty good negotiating, if we're being honest. That's not the whole story, though. There's a twist. In 2016, an auction had some items from the Pawn Stars, including the pistols, and they sold for $42,000. Not bad at all, and it's definitely a time when Chumlee's gut instinct worked out huge for the pawn shop, and a time that even Rick Harrison couldn't say that Chumlee screwed up. In fact, he should have gotten a big pat on the back considering how much money he made the pawn shop. I mean, he basically got them $40,000 profit. 4. Set of samurai swords.
Earlier, Chum spent $4,000 on 3 samurai swords because he thinks he's a samurai expert.
When it comes to historical items that can be brought into a pawn shop, you'd be hard-pressed to find something as cool as a samurai sword. These relics of the past are legendary in every sense of the word. They are a treasure from history, show the true value of great craftsmanship, and more. But they can also be ripped off easier than most would think. So you need to have a keen eye to make sure you don't get swindled into buying a fraud samurai. Enter Chumlee to a customer that brought in a set of samurai swords one day. Chumlee was on duty and he was truly amazed by them, which to be honest, I'm not going to blame him for. His reaction is the same as anyone else's would have been if someone came in ready to sell a set of samurai swords. They're just aesthetically pleasing. So when he was looking at them, you could tell that he was totally taken away with them. Just by the look on Chumlee's face, I bet he was already planning on mounting them on his wall. But there was a problem. He was so enamored with them that he didn't consult with another person or expert about them. Rather, he bought the set of swords for $4,000.
I know that I don't know enough to buy them without calling somebody.
You just bought those?
Yes, I did.
Didn't call anybody and spent over $3,800 on swords.
Sure enough, when the Harrisons found out what Chumlee had done, they weren't happy. All of them thought they were fakes, which does happen a lot in the pawn business. Rick Harrison was so mad about this that he brought in an expert to do damage control and see how much money Chumlee had again lost them.
Really? I'm gonna call Mike and get him down here to take a look at these.
This is a catwalk, Rick, trust me.
And that is where the twist came in. They were real, well and truly, and they were made by known makers, and one of them was even dated to have been made in the 1400s.
Well, how old is that one?
This sword dates from the late 14, early 1500s.
One of the heydays of the katana and samurai. And while one of the swords had some fake branding, the rest of it was real.
Unfortunately, the signature appears to be a forgery.
And was still worth some good money. So that was a true set of samurai swords that Chumlee bought. All told, the expert stated that the swords were worth $13,000. So even with the $4,000 that was used to buy them, that was $9,000 profit. Rick wasn't pleased, but at the end of the day, Chumlee made a good buy. True, you could say he seriously got lucky, but you also can't deny that for once, his childlike attitude got the Pawn Stars some serious cash. 5. The potato.
This it dates back to the 60s. Martin Luther King got hit with this during his peace riot.
Why do you watch Pawn Stars? It's likely because of the Harrisons and Chumlee in part, But you're no doubt curious as to what amazing and rare or potentially priceless items they're going to try and acquire. Well, that's all fair, but we all know that sometimes the Pawn Stars buy some weird items. Case in point, Chumlee bought a potato. Yeah, I wish I was making this stuff up, but I'm not. Hear me out, okay? This all happened when a customer named Sean Price came into the gold and silver pawn shop with a goal. And that goal was indeed to sell a potato. No, I'm really not making this up. He was led into the shop with the potato so that he could sell it. Technically speaking, it wasn't your average potato. It was a potato that he claimed was actually thrown at and hit Martin Luther King Jr., who was one of the biggest voices of the civil rights movements and is a figure who is revered for his activism to this day. So if this had indeed been a potato that had come in contact with him, it honestly would be worth something. You're already seeing where this is going, right? There was a very big and obvious problem with this claim. Mainly, there was no documentation or proof that this was indeed a potato that did what he thought it did. And Chumlee honestly knew that. And thank goodness, because not even he could be that dumb to trust the customer on the history of a potato based solely on his word. Especially since Sean Price was asking $100,000 for it. Thankfully, he didn't even come close to that offer. Instead, Chumlee bought the potato for $2.25, and Price seemed fine with that. This whole interaction is weird from top to bottom. First and foremost, who asked $100,000 for a potato? Even a famous potato. Heck, even if this was indeed the potato that did what he said it did, it wouldn't be worth that much. And then to settle for $2.25? Rick Harrison would be proud of that negotiating by Chumlee. All this goes to prove that sometimes even the gold and silver pawn shop has to deal with some weird customers. No one is immune. You almost have to wonder, though, what would have happened if Rick had been there and not Chumlee? I imagine Rick would have been testing out some of his ancient weapons on him. I'm just saying. 6. Rick's sword.
Tell you over the years.
What have you taught me?
Yeah. Not to touch that with your hands.
So what can you tell me about this, Chum?
As we've established, Chumlee isn't the best at the counter. Even worse, he has a very bad habit of ignoring direct orders from Rick Harrison, his boss. Yet in one very specific instance, ignoring him turned out to be a boom for the shop in many ways. Rick had bought on his own a 17th century katana, which is a sword made in Japan. But this particular one wasn't for sale in the shop. Rather, Rick personally sent this sword to Japan for the sole purpose of it getting fully restored and being an item in the shop for people to just look at and not buy. Why do this? It's eye candy, and it gets people thinking that if they have this in the shop, there could be many items of this quality there as well. And given that it's the Pawn Stars, that's a safe bet, because they aren't the type of shop who just holds the good items for themselves, just some of the good items. Getting back to what happened, the status of the sword was made very clear to both Chumlee and Corey, who were there when the sword was returned to Rick. He noted that the sword itself was around $35,000 in terms of worth now, and this was not to be sold under any circumstances. Are you listening, Chumlee? Obviously, he didn't because of the list that he finds himself up. So how did Chumlee screw this up? Simple. It happened when a man by the name of Dana White entered the gold and silver pawn shop. If you somehow don't recognize that name, he's the man who helps run and promote the UFC, one of the most popular combat sports on the planet, and one that has made Dana very rich over the years. Dana White came to the store because he was looking for a classic sword to buy, and Chumlee didn't hesitate 1 second to offer up Rick's sword, which he should have at least called Rick about first, but it's Chumlee, so of course, he didn't do that. In terms of the deal itself, he only got $30,000, which is a loss of $5,000. But he got Dana White to purchase another $30,000 worth of other swords, thus increasing the profits made.
I'll take this for $30,000 and I'll buy every one of those swords that you showed me over there too.
So another $30,000 for the other swords.
It's all on you, buddy.
So overall, he did well and proved he can negotiate even with a tough businessman like Dana White. And trust me when I say that Dana White knows how to do a deal. Plus, when Rick asked Dana to come back to talk about the sword he wasn't supposed to buy, Rick got him to buy another sword for $9,000.
Can we do 9?
Yeah, I'll give you 9 for it.
Sweet.
Cool. Obviously, this was both a win and a loss for Rick. He lost his sword, but did make money. So while he may want to fire Chumlee, It won't be because he cost him money, just cost him something he honestly really liked, which you could argue is the worst sin because Rick put a lot of time and money into that sword. And you can bet that if Chumlee had done a bad deal, he would have probably put a sword through Chumlee. 7. Stan Lee's past.
The idea, and then Romita would pencil it in and color it, and it would become this iconic comic strip.
Comic books are tricky to put a price on, and Chumlee in the past has made bad deals in regards to comics that set the store back a hefty profit, and trust me, it was really bad. Yet another time, not only did he make the right call in getting an evaluation, an iconic circumstance led to a legendary meeting, one that he'll remember forever, especially in light of what's happened recently. A customer came in with an enlarged comic book panel, which was given out for promotional reasons back when it was made. This happened a lot back then, and still happens now to certain extents. But the real selling point was that it was signed by two comic legends. Artist John Romita, who had a long career in comics and has a son doing them now, and the one and only Stan Lee. Yes, that Stan Lee, the guy who helped make Marvel Comics what it is today. Usually, seeing a Stan Lee signature would be enough for anyone to make a deal, even if it's fake. But instead of just jumping the gun and hoping that the signatures were real, he decided to go to the source, as it were. He knew that Stan Lee was in town, which shows that this deal was meant to be, and actually took the customer to meet him.
So I'm headed down to the Avenger Station on the Strip right now to meet the creator of Spider-Man, the one and only Stan Lee himself.
After getting to see Stan, they showed him the panels, and Stan Lee went full nostalgia.
All right, I have this comic strip here.
Wow. Oh, this brings back memories.
He recalled to him and John signing the panels, proving that it was real in the best way possible.
Yeah. That's my signature.
So that is your signature, huh?
Oh, no doubt about it.
Not to mention, it's likely been decades since he heard or even thought about those panels, so seeing them like this in such great condition must have been a treat. Chumlee got this item for $5,000, which is a steal given the prominence of Lee and Romita in the comics world. And whoever has that panel page now likely has an even greater item in terms of price because of the recent passing of Stan Lee. This was a time when Chumlee's use of knowledge and the Pawn Stars method of verification really helped him out. And again, he got to meet Stan Lee. That's pretty epic. Plus, this is a meeting that he can tell his friends and be really proud of because he got to meet Stan Lee and got him to relive a fond memory. Sometimes it's the little things that get to be the biggest jackpots in this game, 8. The Chumlee Brand. Let's be honest here. When you hear the words Chumlee and business store owner, you're likely thinking it's either a joke or an oxymoron. After all, if he ran the gold and silver pawn shop, it'd likely go out of business, And while that may be true to some extent, there's no doubt that he did buy a business and make a small fortune off of it. This all occurred after the show got famous on the History Channel. It was clear to both History Channel and viewers of the series that Chumlee was one of the bigger stars of the show, which is not a knock on the Harrisons, it's just that something about Chumlee worked with people, much to Rick Harrison's chagrin. Anyway, when Chumlee realized this and noticed the potential of this, he decided to go all out on his brand. He made a novelty store, one that sold items featuring himself and the other Pawn Stars members. Basically, he put their pictures and other images featuring them on shirts, hats, and other novelty items that you would get after going to a place like Las Vegas. You'd think that something like this wouldn't work for a whole host of reasons, including the thing being run by Chumlee. But the stuff was so successful that he was making a ton of cash, and he even wore some of the merchandise on Pawn Stars, which helped expand the brand even more because of the visual nature of the show itself. So for all of his faults, he was actually rather smart in seeing the potential for branding himself. In fact, he was the only one of the Pawn Stars to do this for a long time, which technically means that in the novelty game, Chumlee had more foresight than all the Harrisons combined. If you're expecting a happy ending for this, you're going to have to settle for a 50-50 split on that. Chumlee actually got tired of being the guy running the store, so he sold partial ownership to Rick Harrison. And not only did Rick make the deal, he actually ran the shop better than Chumlee, which if you think about it, isn't that hard to believe at all. And because he's part owner now, he sells some of the novelty apparel in the gold and silver pawn shop. So, while not fully bright or a great businessman in the long term, there's no denying what he did. And while he did sell the one store, he has worked on expanding his brand even more, even going so far as to get a candy store and get lessons in being a DJ. And with the continued success of Pawn Stars, the Chumlee brand is not showing any signs of slowing.
We're huge.
This is another case where a deal wasn't made by Chumlee, but it was one where he impressed a certain someone with his knowledge. Cars come to the Pawn Stars somewhat frequently, but Chumlee isn't the guy to trust when it comes to car recommendations. But that wasn't the case when he was able to find a car owned by the legendary and infamous rapper known simply as Tupac Shakur. During the early days of rap, Tupac Shakur was a true legend. His music is still respected to this day, and due to the way he passed, many think he's alive, even though how he passed specifically is still a bit of a mystery outside of it being a sudden event. But this wasn't just a car owned by him. This is the literal car that Tupac was in when the drive-by happened that would eventually claim his life. The new owners had restored the vehicle a bit, but there was plenty of proof that this was the real deal car that he was in during the event. Impressed by the find, Rick got his local appraiser to come in to give value to the car. He noted that it could be worth almost $1 million. That's a very valuable car, likely due to the history within it and who owned it. Despite some haggling, the deal couldn't be done as the owners wanted much more than Rick was willing to offer. But even Rick noted that he had learned something from Chumlee that day, which is a pretty rare occasion. Rick was impressed with Chumlee, and that must have been a pretty great day for him. After all, this is Chumlee, the guy who doesn't know a lot about a lot. But in this case, he knew a lot, and he did a lot to prove that this was, at the very least, taking a look. And that's pretty impressive. And there you have it, a look at the successes and good moves by Chumlee. Are you surprised that he had this many wins? Or did you think that he didn't have more than a handful of victories compared to the Harrisons? Which one of these good things did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on King Trending.
A simple reminder on how to enter our brand new giveaway. We will be giving away either an iPhone X Max, the new iPad mini, or a MacBook Pro. It's really your choice. So be sure to leave a like, comment the keyword, subscribe, and turn on notifications to enter the giveaway. It's really that simple. Go for it.